Here we go. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the J.D. Rucker Show. I'm your host, J.D. Rucker, and today's show may very well be the most important show that I've ever done. I know I've said that before, and before it was true as well. It seems as if the way the world is going, we are stuck in this loop of continuous, ongoing, massive threats that continue to emerge. Massive threats that unfortunately a lot of people just aren't aware of. I had to go into some real prayer, some real thought, contemplation, trying to figure out, am I crazy? As I look at this stuff, as I look at the pandemic treaty, as I look at what the World Health Assembly is doing with the 2005 IHR, I start questioning how is this happening right in front of our face, right under our noses, and yet so few in corporate media are talking about it, and unfortunately so few in conservative or alternative media are talking about it as well. I started thinking, maybe I'm crazy, maybe this just isn't that big of a deal and I'm blowing it out of proportion, and you know what, it's all going to work out and everything's fine. Then I started thinking, maybe there's this strong delusion that's being cast upon the world, cast upon even freedom-loving patriots who are seeing it and either ignoring it or seeing it and thinking, you know what, it's not, maybe it's over their head. I came to the conclusion that they are seeing it, they are aware of it, but it is just so monstrous, so evil, that there's sort of this sense of it can't be real. This can't really be happening. And so they don't want to talk about it. We're talking about specifically the zero draft, which is currently being worked on right now as we speak. As you're watching me on this show, they're working on it. They're working on making the final touches, making the changes that will be necessary in order to get it signed by 194 nations, including the United States. Now, Joe Biden, he has been on board from the beginning, so this isn't like some stretch for him. It's, or do we need to make some changes? No, he's been pushing for it to be even harsher. He's been pushing to give away even more of our sovereignty than it already takes away. And you might think, how is that even possible, considering how much it does? And I mean, he's old, I guess. Maybe he just wants to see everything fall apart before it's too late for him to recognize it anymore. Maybe he just wants to see the fulfillment of the evil machinations of the globalist elite cabal for which he works. He wants to rush it along so that he gets to see it in his lifetime. I don't know what's motivating him to lead this charge quietly. Again, nobody's talking about this. Even corporate media, you would think that they would be heralding it, but they're hush-hush about it. Even the usual suspects in conservative and alternative media, the people who really should be like, oh my gosh, this is insane, what's going on? Many of them are. I would say maybe a dozen, if you want to consider that to be many. I don't. I think this should be the biggest story out there right now. Unfortunately, and I do apologize for those who saw the show on Tuesday. I said I would be back either Tuesday night or Wednesday morning. We had a little snafu, a little challenge. There was an emergency, and I had to take over the Liberty Daily for the day, for Wednesday. And as a result, that, like I tell people, that's a 5 a.m. to midnight job. It's a very encompassing task, and I don't generally work it through the week, but there was a situation that arose that forced me to pop in there, and I wasn't able to get this show that you're watching now. I wasn't able to get it pre-recorded Tuesday night or Wednesday morning or anything in time to get it up yesterday. So I apologize for that. But I guess maybe it's a good thing, because there have actually been some developments just since then that do need to be covered. Anybody who's been watching my show for a while, you know that I've been talking about this, well, for over a year now. You know that last week I devoted 4 hours of the show to this topic, and this week I've already put in about an hour and 51 minutes, and we're probably going to be doing about the same today. And I'm still a little bit doubtful that we'll be able to cover everything, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try to push everything through because we are in dire straits, and that's all there is to it. We are in dire straits. This is it. I keep trying to say, people, wake up. This is it. This is the big one. This is the one that where, you know what, if everything else has a chance of being stopped, if we can somehow stop central bank digital currencies, if we can somehow slow down the climate change cult, if we can reverse the open borders policies and go back to sanity at our borders and not have this invasion that's currently happening, if we can do all these various things, get a hold of the food crisis, get a hold of the economic crisis that's brewing, we can end the war in Ukraine and prevent the war in Taiwan. And if we can do all of these things, if we were able to somehow get all of that accomplished very quickly, this threat here, the pandemic treaty, and as well as the ugly cousin, I guess you could say, the changes to the 2005 IHR, if those come to pass, even with all of our other existential threats out of the way, we would still be in very deep crap. So, like I said, I've come to the conclusion that the reason that this isn't being talked about nearly as much as it should be is because it's just too big. The draft itself, the WHO CA+, as they're calling it, is the zero draft that's currently being worked on. It's only 32 pages. It didn't take me, and I'm not a very fast reader, it didn't take me very long to read through it twice. I read through it 2 times to make sure that I got every nuance, caught every little double speak that they use to try to hide their intentions. And they did a very good job, I will admit. They did a very good job. I was reading some people that I actually respect, people that I think are very good in conservative media that missed the point. You know, one in particular, there was one where they were saying, oh, see, here's where it shows that they are going to allow for sovereignty. And I thought, you know, just read the next sentence and you can see that they're literally not allowing for sovereignty. They're basically saying, sure, we will respect the sovereignty of individual states unless, but, you know, there's always that conjunction, unless their actions are harming the people. And who will decide if those actions are harming the people? The WHO. And how will they decide? If they go against their policy. So it's kind of like saying, look, you can do anything you want as long as it's exactly what we tell you to do. You have the choice to do it, and you can choose not to do it, but then we'll still force you to do it. It really is very clever. Again, I've spoken to multiple constitutional scholars. I've spoken to an international legal scholar, and all of them were unfortunately impressed. They were all looking through this and like, oh yeah, oh okay, yeah, I see what they did here. Wow. I got a lot of wows in response to certain components because they were looking at this and saying, yeah, okay, I see. Now, one of the feedbacks that I get, oh, and in God's, I gotta remember, look at chat, always look at chat. In God's hands, great name, great handle, says, good day, sir. Well, good day to you, in God's hands. Okay, there's my quick chat glimpse of the segment. The argument that I keep hearing from, and some of you will make this argument, it'll be in the chat, it'll be in the comments, it'll be on my Substack, it'll be on the articles. The argument that's getting made is that, oh, you know what, it doesn't matter if he signs it because this is a treaty, and a treaty has to be ratified by the Senate, at which point I say, well, technically speaking, it's ratified by the parties that are involved, and the Senate has to approve ratification with a supermajority vote, and that's true. But even then, in this particular case, it does not. Now, those of you who are watching, if you want to follow along with my very extensive notes, I think I've got like 3,000 words worth of notes today, over 3,000 words worth of notes today on this subject. I've been working on it for, well, 2 days now. You can check that out over at discernreport.com, discernreport.com, and it's titled 7 Ways the WHO Pandemic Treaty Will Obliterate Far More Than U.S. Sovereignty. So let's dispel this claim. Let's start off right there. Before we get any further, let's dispel this claim that it has to be approved by the Senate. As I said, ratification of a treaty is constitutional, and for a treaty to be ratified, it must get 67 senators, and that's hard. Okay, that's hard across the board. But what people seem to miss, when I say people, I would say the constitutional scholars, they were all very well aware of it. Some of the journalists that I've talked to have been aware of it, but a lot of people miss that the vast majority of these agreements that take place, the vast majority of them, do not go through a ratification process that goes through the Senate. Most of these, and they're usually referred to as something to the effect of an executive agreement, or something like that. They bypass the Constitution essentially, and it's allowed by the Supreme Court under certain circumstances. One such circumstance, and this actually happened this year with the OECD Global Tax Agreement. Okay, the Senate, GOP said, "Don't even try it, brother. Don't even try it, because we're not going to. You're never going to get your 2/3 vote." Well, Biden signed it anyway, but he signed it again as an executive agreement. This is an executive agreement with multiple nations across the world, and thus far, it has not had any blowback. There's not been any challenge to whether or not this international agreement signed by Joe Biden affects companies. As a matter of fact, there have been companies in the United States that have been affected by international groups, and other nations have utilized this to go after them from a tax perspective. You might say, that's not possible. Wouldn't we know about this? And I would argue, yes, we probably should, but corporate media is not going to tell you. They glazed over real fast as soon as it happened last year. And then in conservative media, we had a whole lot of, well, this really stinks. So what's happening with Hunter Biden's laptop? And that bugs me. But again, there's plenty of precedent. Kevin Stocklin over at the Epoch Times did a fantastic job of really summarizing why this does not fall under the purview of the constitutional approach to ratifying a treaty. According to his article, and this was published, I think, 2 weeks ago, but I still see even today there were some people referencing it. That's how outstanding this article was, and we'll link to it over at discernreport.com. Kevin Stocklin says, a key question surrounding the accord is whether the Biden administration can bind the United States to treaties and agreements without Senate consent, which is required under the Constitution. The Zero Draft concedes that, per international law, treaties between countries must be ratified by national legislatures, thus respecting the right of their citizens to consent. Okay, there it is. Done. We're done. It's not going to work. Oh, wait, there's more to the, hold on. There's more. However, the draft also includes a clause that the accord will go into effect on a provisional basis as soon as it's signed by delegates to the WHO, and would therefore be legally binding on members without being ratified by legislatures. According to Francis Boyle, a constitutional scholar, says, whoever drafted this clause knew as much about U.S. constitutional law and international law as I did, and deliberately drafted it to circumvent the power of the Senate to give its advice and consent to treaties, to provisionally bring it into force immediately upon signature. The Biden administration will take the position that this is an international executive agreement that the president can conclude of his own accord without approval by Congress, and is binding on the United States of America, including all states and local democratically elected officials, governors, attorney generals, and health officials. There are several U.S. Supreme Court decisions that may support the Biden administration's position, according to Boyle. They include State of Missouri versus Holland, in which the Supreme Court ruled that treaties supersede state laws, while other decisions, such as United States versus Belmont, ruled that, and pay attention, United States versus Belmont ruled that executive agreements without Senate consent can be legally binding with the force of treaties. There are parallels between the WHO Pandemic Accord and a recent Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development Global Tax Agreement, that's the OECD that I mentioned earlier, which the Biden administration signed on to, although Republicans say it has no path forward to legislative approval. In the OECD agreement, punitive terms are built in that allow foreign countries to punish American companies if the deal isn't ratified by the United States. In other words, here's an agreement that goes into an effect that goes into effect as soon as it's signed, just as so many other agreements have in the past. It goes in under a provisional basis, technically pending Senate approval for ratification. But there is no time limit, folks. This is the part that I don't think people seem to miss. It goes into effect immediately upon Joe Biden's signature. It stays in a provisional status until it's officially ratified. But it doesn't have to be officially ratified by any particular date. It can stay in provisional status indefinitely. The Senate may never, ever, ever get the opportunity to try to approve ratification, in which case it's still binding. That's the part that people see. It won't be binding until the Senate approves. That's not what this says. That's not what the Supreme Court says. Their interpretation of the Constitution declares that these executive agreements in the provisional state still take effect, still become the rule of law. Stop saying, if you're one of those people that say, don't worry, it has to get through the Senate. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Not yet. Now, Lord willing, we will be able to address that in the very near future. Lord willing, somebody smarter than me, somebody with more money, more power, more whatever, will be able to mount a legal attack against this. I'm hoping that will happen. I'm certain it will. Okay, and if it doesn't, well, then I guess I'm going to have to throw my hat in the ring and say, okay, I'm not an attorney, so I need some smart people around me to make this happen. But we've got to make this happen. We've got to make this happen. This is that big. And so please do not ignore this. One of the things that we are trying to do more of, I got I wouldn't say a complaint. It was a suggestion from one of my sponsors, and I'm not going to say which sponsor because I don't want to out them, because it wasn't a rude suggestion, but it was basically I was told by the sponsor, if you start talking about more, mainstream topics, if you don't, dive in, they were telling me specifically about the pandemic treaty. They're like, look, I know that you think it's important, but if you really want to start selling this stuff, you got, he actually said, you should start being more like Charlie Kirk or Ben Shapiro. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. I mean, nothing against Charlie Kirk or Ben Shapiro. They have exponentially bigger audiences than me. But I can assure you this, that the topics that we choose are chosen because they're on mission. I don't choose my topics in order to try to get sponsors more, whatever, sales. That's not the purpose of the topics I pick. I pick the topics, such as today's topic, based specifically on the fact that it's important and that not enough people are talking about it. Do I want to devote 8 hours in 2 weeks to this? Absolutely not. I'd rather devote 10 minutes and get people with bigger voices out there saying, oh, okay, no, we definitely got to talk about this, and get them going and talking about it, because they can do more than me. They have a bigger audience than I do, for now. But with that said, I'm not going to back down for the sake of popularity. With that said, I still do need to make a living off this. So, pick a sponsor, any sponsor. Let's go with meds. You know what? It's perfect because we are talking about meds. I have partnered with a company that specializes in helping people get antibiotics delivered to their door. You can go to jdrucker.com/meds, jdrucker.com/meds, and sign up. Then you'll get a telehealth call. They'll say, hey, I don't know, ask you a few questions so that it's all legal. It's got to be legal. We don't want to do anything that breaks any laws, but then they'll be able to ship long-term storage antibiotics to your door. You can bypass the supply chain issues, bypass having to go to your doctor and try to explain why you need amoxicillin or whatever it is. They'll just get it to you, and you can use promo code Rucker10, RUCKER, the number 10, 10, Rucker10, and get, I think it's either $10 or I think it's $10 off. We'll go with $10. If it's more than that, great, but I'll stay with the lowest common denominator. So there's that. And by the way, that I picked that sponsor specifically because that's not the sponsor that was complaining about my choice of topics. I love them. They love me. It's all love, all love. So something that doesn't get talked about enough, even the people that are talking about the pandemic treaty, one thing that doesn't get talked about nearly enough is the fact that there's not just the pandemic treaty. As I mentioned on the last couple of shows, I believe, there is what the pandemic treaty that's happening with the World Health Organization, and that's getting at least a little bit of attention. But what's not getting any attention at all, really, is what's happening with the World Health Assembly. You might be like, well, who is the World Health Assembly? And I'll tell you, they are the basically the rule-making body, the government, the I guess the not legislative body. They're the guys that run the WHO. You think of them almost like the board of rules making. I don't know, easiest way to put it. World Health Assembly. They are working on the 2005 International Health Regulations, the IHR. And through there, we get to see that it's much worse than just dealing with one. We're dealing with a two-headed hydra here, folks. They're taking it from both angles. If they get one, if they get the pandemic treaty signed, great, they win in their eyes. If they get the IHR rules signed by all 96 nations, great, they win. They at least in their eyes. If they can get both, that's jackpot. That'll save them cut a year off of their evil machinations to take over the world. I'm not kidding. I mean, that's why they're taking this from it's a backup plan on a backup plan, and if they get both, hey, great. And the chances are they are going to get both. That's what's scary about this. For those following along, you'll see it over at discernreport.com. I'm on the section for a two-track approach. And as I noted, with as little attention as is being paid to the pandemic treaty, even less attention is being paid to the World Health Assembly's push to amend the 2005 International Health Regulations. There is plenty of crossover between the two, but there are also unique challenges that they pose. And according to, this is, again, back to that article from the Epoch Times, the WHO Pandemic Treaty is part of a two-track effort coinciding with an initiative by the World Health Assembly to create new global pandemic regulations that experts fear would also supersede the laws of member states. The World Health Assembly is the rulemaking body of the WHO, comprised of representatives from the member states. And this is a quote from Francis Boyle, who I quoted earlier. Both initiatives are fatally dangerous. Either one or both would set up a worldwide medical police state under the control of the WHO, and in particular, the WHO Director General Tedros. If either one or both of these go through, Tedros or his successor will be able to issue orders that will go all the way down the pipe to your primary care physician. According to physician Meryl Nass, if these rules go through as currently drafted, I, as a doctor, will be told what I am allowed to give to a patient and what I am prohibited from giving a patient whenever the WHO declares a public health emergency. So they can tell you you're getting remdesivir, but you can't have hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin. What they're also saying is they believe in equity, which means everybody in the world gets vaccinated, whether or not you need it, whether or not you're already immune. Regarding medical treatments, the accord would require member nations to monitor and regulate against substandard and falsified pandemic-related products. And of course, who decides that? That would be the WHO. Based on the previous WHO and Biden administration policy, this would likely include forcing populations to take newly developed vaccines while preventing doctors from prescribing non-vaccine treatments or medicines. Now, if you are following along, I want you to pay very extra close attention. And again, you can follow along. The article is over at discernreport.com. Pay extra close attention. You can even click on it and it'll come up larger in your screen. This was put together by James Roguski. He put it up over at his Substack, and there's a link to his Substack in that article over at discernreport.com. And it shows the differences between, it's a side-by-side comparison between the proposed amendments to the 2005 IHR and the proposed WHO CA Plus, or the pandemic treaty. The working group for amendments to the international health regulations, these are the top 10 reasons that they put together. And I believe, I'm not sure if he works for them or he's just helping them, but he's got several websites here that I'll note here for those who want to take note of it. Stopthewho.com. rejectdigitalenslavement.com, stoptheglobalagenda.com, and exitthewho.com. And again, you can find this if you don't want to write all that down, just write down discernreport.com and you'll be able to find all these. So these are the top 10 reasons to oppose the IHR amendments. Again, this is not the pandemic treaty. This is the ugly cousin of the pandemic treaty that's happening simultaneously. They actually started meeting the week before they started meeting about the pandemic treaty itself. Number one, change from advisory to mandatory. And that's so extremely important. People keep saying, and the AP fact check on the pandemic treaty itself even noted that their whole thing for saying, oh, this doesn't get rid of sovereignty, don't worry about it, nothing to see here. Their claim is that you don't have to worry about it because it's all just advisory. The WHO just puts out recommendations. What they didn't see, and as of right now, that is the case. That is true. What they didn't see was they didn't put together here's the pandemic treaty, here's the IHR changes. They didn't put those together to come to the conclusion that the IHR treaty combined with the World Health Organization, the pandemic treaty, it's like they give each other teeth. It's like dance partners of tyranny, okay? Medical tyranny rearing its ugly head in a beautiful symbiotic relationship between these two different and yet perfectly aligned existential threats that are bearing down on us as we speak. So number one, it changes from advisory to mandatory. Number two, potential rather than active emergencies. I'm going to save that one because that's the big one. Okay, to me, that's the big one. This isn't about the WHO comes into action when there's a pandemic. This is about the WHO takes action to prevent pandemics, which, for those who aren't keeping score, I'll go ahead and lay the score out for you. That means that these actions, these powers, will be in effect at all times because there's always a need to prevent the next pandemic, right? Even if you're in between pandemics, there's a pandemic going, okay, we're active in trying to fight the pandemic. And if there's not a pandemic going, okay, we're active in trying to prevent the next pandemic. In other words, they're always active. Everything that they're trying to do here will make it to where they're not just responding, they're being proactive. And that should terrify you because, again, that means 24/7. They don't even take holidays off. Number three, disregard for dignity, human rights, and freedoms. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Number four, allocation plan for health products. We'll definitely talk about that one. That's a big one, okay? And I don't think that's the one, if I couldn't convince people how dangerous all of this stuff is through nuance, I just have to read the part about how they're going to give away 20% of our medical equipment to countries that need it more than us. How they're essentially going to use this to socialize medicine worldwide, not just socialize medicine here or in some countries or a lot of countries, everywhere. Everywhere. You will own nothing. Number five, mandatory medical treatments. We'll talk about that. Global health certificates, better known as vaccine passports, but even bigger than that. Loss of sovereignty, we've talked about that. Censorship, we're definitely going to talk about that. Potentially enormous, unspecified costs. We won't talk about that. So I should probably talk about that. Yes. So right now, the World Health Organization operates in billions in yearly. I think it's like 5 billion, if I recall, in yearly funding. They're talking about taking that up exponentially. Okay, we're not talking about it's going to be not exponentially at a degree much higher. In other words, adding zeros to the end, multiple zeros to the end. We're talking about, I would say, at least in the hundreds of billions of dollars in yearly expenditures, or even in the trillions of dollars. That is, again, this is their push. For those who didn't watch the last show or the show before, I believe, and I think it was last show. It's funny because the WHO actually put together a body, an investigative body, to see how do they handle COVID-19? How will you give us a report card? And this allegedly unbiased group went through and they said, you guys screwed up big time. Okay, you guys, your initial response was bad. How you handled China was bad. not embracing this was bad, not going after that was bad. It was just terrible. You guys just did a terrible, terrible job. And it's like, oh, okay, well, at least they're being honest. But then you go down and you read the recommendations and the solutions to why. How do we keep the World Health Organization from doing a terrible job next time? Their solutions were, we need more budget. We need more power. We need more control. We screwed up because we didn't go fully into it, because we didn't have a $500 billion budget. We only had a $5 billion budget. If we'd had that $500 billion budget, we could have dressed much better. And we were only able to make recommendations as advisors. We didn't have anything binding. We couldn't just tell people, hey, lock down now, and make sure that nobody ever goes to church again, ever. Just shut the churches down. We recommended it. We would want to make that mandatory and binding, okay, under threat of military intervention for those who don't get involved. That's what they really wanted. And that was the conclusion of this unbiased group that said the World Health Organization really messed up their response to the pandemic. You can't make this up. I mean, the best fiction writers in the world, no, they couldn't make this up because nobody would believe it. It's like Woody Harrelson said, he described that, a movie that he fictioned, during Saturday Night Live, a movie that he wouldn't make because nobody would believe it, that it could ever happen. And of course, he was describing exactly what happened through Big Pharma. Number 9. Oh no, we covered number 9. Number 10, obligations of duty to cooperate. What does that mean? And if you can answer that question, then you should be pretty darn scared. Adoption, according to this graphic, adoption of amendments only requires a simple majority, no signature by country leaders, and no Senate or Parliament votes are needed. We've already signed on to this, folks. Okay, we signed on to this over a decade and a half ago, almost 2 decades ago. They're just changing the rules of what we signed on to. And we have a member who's going to be part of that. And if you think that member is going to say, oh, no, this goes against their sovereignty. No, that member will say, okay, you guys sure you don't want to take even more power? You guys sure you don't want to, we got lots of money. We're the United States of America. Okay. Don't read the news. Don't go by, the financial woes of the common people. We're the government. You guys just take what you want. Let's get this going, Don't be shy. We have time? Yes, we do. Proposed. Now, this is that was the 2005 International Health Regulations, the IHR, which again doesn't require Biden's signature. Now let's go to what the pandemic treaty. This is separate, aligned but separate. The proposed WHO CA+, aka the pandemic treaty, intergovernmental negotiating body. Okay, these are the top 10 reasons to oppose the pandemic treaty. And I actually disagree with some of this, especially the order. And there are other things that should be in there, and we'll get to those later on in the show. But let's go ahead and see what this particular journalist says. Number 1, the WHO wants complete control. Can't deny that. They do. And we're not just talking about complete control during pandemics. That's the other complaint that I hear, or not complaint, but the other excuse that I hear about why people aren't too concerned, especially conservative and alternative media. It's like, oh, the pandemic's over, so this won't even take an effect, which is wrong, by the way. That's not wrong. The pandemic is over. It's wrong that it won't take effect. It doesn't require a pandemic to take effect. Again, we're talking about pandemic prevention. Once the paper is signed, the WHO goes into worldwide pandemic prevention mode, and they will have the power to do whatever they feel is necessary to prevent a pandemic. Anything. Number 2, common but differentiated responsibilities. Yeah, I guess that's one reason to oppose it. But when people say, oh, you know what, the United States pays too much, folks, there's nothing where we don't pay too much. There's nothing where we don't have an over. I mean, we are the most, by far, hands down, not even close. We are the most generous nation in the history of the planet. Okay, we give more away in a year than most planets, yeah, that too, than most countries have given away in the entire existence of their nation. Okay, so if you want to say, oh, we should make it fair, okay, we could say that about a billion things, and I wish we would. I wish we could get a Congress and a president who would be willing to say, you know what, let's just cut it all off, all of it. Okay, people want to buy arms from us, fine, they can buy it. they want help, and I'm not talking about responses to emergencies. Tsunami hits someplace. Oh, we're not going to give anything to that. But it's funny that we've given what $200 billion to Ukraine, and yet when the earthquake that killed tens of thousands in Turkey and Syria hit, we committed $85 million. That's a lot of money, but compared to $200 billion for far fewer people have been killed in Ukraine since this war that started a year ago than just in the first week after the Syria and Turkey earthquake. I'm not suggesting that it's our responsibility. I'm just saying that if we really want to look at what's fair and what's not, I could do an entire show about it. Believe me, I could probably do 4 shows about it. Let's finish off this list because I'm going to be, again, going through my list, which I think is better. WHO Global Pandemic Supply Chain Networks, big one that we'll be talking about. Speed up regulatory approval of drugs. We'll talk about that a little bit, but that's not an issue, I don't think. Support for, not a big issue. Support for gain of function research. Oh, yeah. Number 6, pathogen access and benefits sharing system. We'll never learn, will we? We will never learn. Number 7, attempts to justify restriction of human rights. That's a huge one. Number 8, censorship once again. Number 9, potentially enormous unspecified costs again. And then, of course, additional bureaucracy, which is always, 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 always a bad thing across the board. It's never a good thing, at least not any iteration of its expanded bureaucracy that I've ever seen. So let's go to a break, okay? Let's go to a break, and then that'll be perfect timing for me to be able to hopefully get through all 7 of these reasons, I guess you could say. All 7 of these, I guess what is it? Ways that, threats that are coming from the pandemic treaty itself. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go to break first. One does not have to be a quote-unquote doomsday prepper in order to acknowledge that the pharmaceutical supply chain could be challenged, could even break down completely at some point in the future. After all, 90% of the ingredients used in the pharmaceuticals that we produce here in the United States come from China. That should scare you. That should concern you greatly. I have started working with a company that helps people to stock up on long-term storage antibiotics. You can get 5 different antibiotics using telehealth. You don't have to go visit a doctor or answer a question. Well, why do you need this? It's so, for whatever reason, antibiotics deserve lots of questions. Well, not with these guys. Go to jdrucker.com/meds, jdrucker.com/meds, and stock up, because you never know what's going to happen. We don't know if and when we won't be able to get these without maybe even presenting our vaccine passport or something. So stock up now. All right, I do want to make sure that we get through this entire list, so I'm going to go through it relatively quickly. And if I go through it so quickly that we beat our time, awesome. Then I'll have an early lunch. Number 1, and I mentioned this earlier, 20% of U.S. medical supplies goes to the WHO for worldwide distribution. Betsy McCoffey from the New York Post wrote about this. One of the few corporate media sites that's even mentioning anything negative about the pandemic treaty at all, or even mentioning it, good or bad, because again, they don't want you to know. You can always tell, by the way, if they want you to talk about something, then they'll talk about it. Okay, if the globalist elite cabal, if the powers that be say, you know what, we want the people focused on this, then they'll have corporate media talk about it repeatedly, and they'll literally send out like a memo. Okay, I don't know how that's never been discussed. Something probably similar, by the way, to how the government talks to big tech, with the Twitter files. People had no idea. I'd say the vast majority of people had no idea there were these direct lines of communication between the government and tens of thousands of people in government and these big tech companies for the sake of promoting censorship. If it wasn't for Elon Musk buying Twitter, and if it wasn't for the Twitter files, we would be nowhere on this. Okay, literally nowhere. We would be, a lot of us knew, and I've actually talked about it 2 years ago. So it's not like it was a secret, but it was for what, 99% of the population, maybe 99.9% of the population had no idea. Now the Twitter files have come out. It's up to maybe 3% of the population knows, because again, we're too focused on other things, and I'm upset by that. Very upset by that. But let's get to what the New York Post says about this 20% for the big guy, and we're not talking about Joe Biden. Under the draft treaty presented Monday in Geneva, the United States will be obligated to hand over a whopping 20% of its medical supplies, including diagnostic tests, antiviral medications, and vaccines, to WHO for distribution. Article 10 of the treaty specifies this will be done in real time, not after America's needs are met. Let me repeat that. Article 10 of the treaty specifies this will be done in real time, not after American needs are met. The United States will no longer be able to rush treatments and vaccines to its own citizens, prioritizing them, us, before sending aid to other countries. Grandma will have to wait longer for her Paxlovid or other treatments because those items, now being stockpiled and paid for by American taxpayers, will be shipped to Nigeria, Uruguay, Afghanistan, and other underdeveloped nations. WHO will call the shots on which countries get what supplies. Treaty supporters skewer the United States for using up most of the Paxlovid on Americans during the recent pandemic and monopolizing early access to vaccines. They think Americans should make their own family's health secondary to achieving global equity. Harvard public health expert Jesse Bump says the treaty is designed to correct, and this is a quote, the shameful and selfish actions of rich countries in the COVID pandemic. Worse, the treaty suspends patent protections for new vaccines, and we're going to talk about that, so let me skip that. That's a whole other discussion. Drug companies will put the brakes on investing billions. Yes, we'll talk about that. So yeah, 20% of the big guy, and the big guy is the WHO. Tedros is the new big guy. You thought Joe Biden was the big guy? Joe Biden was the big guy only with the Chinese Communist Party and Ukraine and probably a few other nations, but he was only the big guy through Hunter and James Biden's machinations, their actions. Okay, and he only got 10%. Okay, now the WHO, Tedros, he's the new big guy. He's the big guy. And he gets 20%. And we're not just talking about money or profits here. We're talking about medical supplies, talking about diagnostics tests, antiviral medications, and yes, vaccines. And we're not just talking about for COVID-19 or monkeypox. We're talking about across the board. And like I said, people will jump in. Somebody's going to hop in there and say, oh, no. That's only during times of pandemic. I cannot stress this enough. For the sake of pandemic prevention, we are handing over all power when it comes to medical decisions. And as I'll discuss later on in today's show, it's not just going to end up being medical decisions. This will encompass nearly every aspect of life, perhaps every aspect of life. People, Alex Jones and Mike Adams and a lot of the guys, David Icke, they've been saying for decades, how the New World Order is going to manifest and how there's going to be, all these things that are going to happen, and we're going to lose sovereignty, we're going to lose control, we're going to become a little, vassal state, and and people have looked to what Klaus Schwab and Henry Kissinger were saying way back in the 70s with, their collaborations with the Club of Rome about how they envisioned 10 regional powers, or as the Bible calls it, 10 kingdoms. They envisioned 10 regional powers that will be controlled under one central government, one world order, a liberal world order that will have control over these 10 regional powers that are equal. We've been hearing about this over and over again. If you've been paying attention from a conspiracy theory perspective, we've been hearing about this, that how it's going to come up, right? I mean, for a long time, since at least the 70s, and probably longer than that. But since at least the 70s, it's been openly discussed. And we've been hearing warnings since the 90s, I would say. It was really when it started heating up about all this, right? Maybe the 80s, maybe 2000s. I don't know exactly when. Well, this is it. We're looking at it, folks. This is it. This is it. this is the beginning of the end if we don't stop it. And I'll get to, the good news, because there is good news. I'll get to that at the end. But I always want to make sure to tell people that no matter how bad things seem, okay, they're not in control. They may think they're in control. They may be granted temporary control over certain things, but the actual big guy, as in God, is in control still. This might be Satan's world that we're living on, and there may be evil abound, and there is. But for this to fully manifest will not be our choice, will not be their choice. It will be God's choice. He has a plan. So are we going to see that plan include these evil machinations? It could be. We don't know the full details of the plan. We just know how it ends, and it ends very well. But we will have to go through hardships. People keep saying, oh, we won't have to go through hardships. We're in the process of going through hardships. Will we go through wrath? Depending upon your Bible interpretation, I say no. I think the Bible seems to be clear about that we aren't going to go through wrath. But, I'm not a Bible scholar. I've heard it spoken about in every direction. Either way, we are definitely in the process right now of your life today. We're going through some certain hard times. I don't care if you're living here in the United States where it seems to be manifesting, or if you live in places where it's definitely manifesting, if you're a Christian in China or Iran or pretty much anywhere in the Middle East. Okay. If you're a Christian in Africa right now, no, you're not going through, hunky-dory times. We're going to go through this. We're in the process of it. And this could be that manifestation. We don't know. We'll see. I hope it is in many ways. I know that sucks because that means that we're at the end times, but then it's also awesome because it means we're in the end times. That's a discussion for another day. Point is that yes, 20% of the U.S. medical supplies will go to the World Health Organization for worldwide distribution. So that's number one. Number two, medical surveillance will be invasive and ubiquitous. Okay, and as I put on the article over at discernreport.com, this could easily be the scariest of the negative components of the pandemic treaty, but I am hopeful that adoption will be slower than they expect. I also believe that those who are not living in cities or even suburbs will be able to avoid this far better than everyone else. It's for these reasons that I dropped this one down on the list. It's now number 2, and I guess you could say if it's a reverse list of 7, this would be the 6th worst scenario that's coming from the pandemic treaty and the IHR, the combination, the two-headed hydra of medical tyranny that we're facing before us as we speak, right now, literally right now. We'll see. But they will be tracking us, and I'm not just talking about traffic, more traffic cameras tracking us. I'm talking about new and innovative ways of tracking us, especially with the rise of artificial intelligence. That's been the biggest challenge so far. It hasn't been like a visual, they haven't had problem with facial recognition, for example. They haven't had problem with putting cameras up. Okay, that's not an issue. That's not hard for them. The problem has been how to sift through all of the data, how to be able to truly track people. And you can't just have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of people staring at computer screens and saying, "Oh, well, that looks like, yep, there's J.D. Rucker. He's walking along. Okay, keep the camera panned on him. Okay, he's one of those insurrectionists. Oh, let's get him going." It's not like that. They're not going to do that. They're not going to hire a bunch of people to do this. They're going to get artificial intelligence to do it. And when I say they're going to, they're already in the process. This technology is already available to them. It's been available now for a little while. Now they're just setting up the power to be able to use it openly. Is it already being used? You betcha. You betcha. We get stories that pop up all the time about how, this tracking and this visual identifying softwares out there, the biometric software, they are already tracking us. This just basically makes it to where they can do it out in the open and under a I guess you could say a distant enemy. So let's say, just as an example, and I want to flesh this out a bit. Let's say, just as an example, you find out that the San Francisco Police Department is using facial recognition technology and various cameras positioned across the entire city in order to track people, potential criminals. Some of you, I'd say a lot of people would be like, "Oh, that sounds like a good idea." You know, then I tell you that, hey, there have actually been arrests of people that turns out that the facial recognition software was wrong, and you'd be like, "Oh no, that's bad." And then you might join a protest, and you might call London Breed or somebody or her office, or you might go and the city council, or you might go to the police department. I mean, you might participate in a protest and say, "We can't do this. You guys can't do this. This is wrong. Look at John Smith over there got wrongly arrested and accused, and then it turned out that he was innocent, but it's already uprooted his life, and so you guys got to stop this." That's the recourse that we potentially have here in the United States of America, as still mostly a free country. Now imagine if it's not the San Francisco Police Department, if it's not the San Francisco City Council or the mayor's office that's doing this. Imagine if it's not even coming from DC. Imagine if it's coming from the World Health Organization. Are you going to fly out to Geneva? Are you going to go go protest Tedros? Are you going to file an appeal with one of the two governors or presidents, or the four vice presidents that are involved in the governing body of this? What are you going to do? What can any of us do? No, we'll be like, "Oh, well, I guess we're going to have to go to our senator or our congressman." And right now, unfortunately, you've got basically Chip Roy in the Congress, who's sort of talking about it and filing feckless legislation to at least state that he and 16 others opposed it. You've got Ron Johnson in the Senate, who has legislation that obviously has zero chance of ever getting even voted upon, let alone, ever really stop the pandemic treaty from happening. And then he's got his Mary Bann, a handful of conservatives. And that's it. What are we going to do? Are we going to wait until we've got just the right mix of actual America First patriotic conservatives populating a super majority of the House and the Senate, as well as having a president that'll sign it and not veto it? Are we going to wait for that? No. So what can we do? Well, the answer, of course, is that, as I alluded to earlier, we have to go through the courts. We have to go through the court system. We have to overturn this through the Supreme Court. Let me read a little bit about this. Article 18, this is from the draft, the Zero Draft, the WHOCA plus. Article 18, Section 6 and 7 state, the parties commit to strengthen multi-sectoral, coordinated, and interoperable and integrated One Health surveillance systems. One Health surveillance systems. I'll talk about One Health here in a minute. Surveillance systems and strengthen laboratory capacity to identify and assess the risks and emergence of pathogens and variants with pandemic potential in order to minimize spillover events, mutations, and the risks associated with zoonotic, neglected, tropical, and vector-borne diseases, with a view to preventing, it's their word. It's not reacting to, it's not stopping, it's preventing outbreaks, small-scale outbreaks in wildlife or domesticated animals from becoming a pandemic. In other words, they're still trying, even now that we know, and most of you have known since probably 2020, that it wasn't bat soup. They're still trying to sell us the bat soup story, even within their own pandemic treaty. Each party shall implement actions to prevent pandemics from pathogens resistant to antimicrobial, blah, 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 blah. We'll get to that. Here's the important part. Foster actions at national and community levels that encompass whole of government and whole of society approaches to control zoonotic outbreaks, including engagement of communities in surveillance that identifies, and they keep going back to the zoonotic outbreaks. This is important to them. And one of the reasons, the One Health concept, there's two reasons. And I'll get to reason number two, which is the climate change aspect of it, which is the big one. But there's reason number one that they're so focused on this is because they need the catch-all for surveillance. In other words, it's not just a matter of, we're going to make sure to monitor, reports from doctors at various clinics and hospitals across the world and see, oh, could this one be bad? Could this one be bad? No, they want to be able to monitor everything. They want to be able to monitor you. They want to be able to monitor me, whatever we're doing. They want to be able to get blood samples, to compel blood samples, DNA samples, nasal swabs, whatever. Why? Because in order to prevent a pandemic, they need access. to all the information. They need to be able to track you, not just where you are today, but hey, let's say, just as an example, that they claim, and they can claim this without, their word is above reproach according to the pandemic treaty. So they can claim that, hey, we're seeing an outbreak in Detroit from a dog bite. Okay. So we need to go back through all the surveillance we've collected and be able to track where this person was through their cell phone data, through camera data, through anything. And not only, basically think along the lines of contact tracing, but they're not going to, pull you aside and have you make a list of the people you talk to. They'll be like, oh, no, well, we've got it. We can see everybody you've been in contact with since the dog bite on Thursday. We can, oh, there you are. See, that's the point where you were actually bitten by the dog. And then you walked over to your mom's house, and then you drove from your mom's house to your girlfriend's house, and then you guys all went to go eat. Okay, so we got to track all those people at the restaurant. Okay, just track them. Yeah, just not all of them. Just get anybody who was in contact with anybody who came within 6 feet of this person. Oh, crap, he went to the bathroom. Well, go ahead and pull up the bathroom cam. I'm laughing. I'm being facetious, but I'm not, because all of this could be real. And if some of it's not, praise God. I'm offering you guys the worst case scenarios across the board. That's important, that you know what it could be. But even if you go with the best case scenarios, that's not good. If this goes through, and I should say, because we're at that stage now, since nobody's paying attention to it, when this goes through, we have to fight this with everything that we've got. There is no second chance on this one. We either stop it or we don't. Did we make it through 2? We did. We made it through all 2. We made it through 2 out of 7. We're on track. Let's go to break, and then we'll get even more on track on the other side of the break. Try to finish off the last 5 in 3 segments. It's no secret to my listeners, my viewers, anybody who's visited my websites, that I am very bullish on gold and silver here in 2023. The United States economy is looking challenged, we'll say. They're pushing for central bank digital currencies. Of course, the central banks themselves are buying up gold and silver like crazy, like they've never done before. That should tell you something. If you have wealth, retirement, your life savings, it's time to protect it, to secure it, by putting some or all of it into a self-directed precious metals IRA. There are different types of products out there. I have found 3 companies that do a fantastic job. These are America First companies that can help you to secure your retirement, your wealth, your life savings in a self-directed IRA. Go to jdrucker.com/IRA. You'll have 3 America First companies to choose from. Pick 1, pick 2, pick 3. jdrucker.com/IRA. I've always been, I would say, at least for the last 2 years, we'll say, I think it's probably a year and a half, sometime between a year and a half and 2 years, I've been bullish on all this stuff. For those who don't know my history, number one, if this is the first time you're watching the show, be sure to hit subscribe, hit all the buttons or bells or whistles or whatever it is that you're supposed to hit. I'm not sure. Hit buttons, okay, and follow follow along. But for those who aren't aware, I haven't always been a conspiracy theory guy. I haven't always been a prepper guy. Okay, this is all new to me. Okay, I've been doing it for now, I would say, a little bit less than 2 years, most likely. But it wasn't until, I would say, approximately October or November of last year, of 2022, when I came to the conclusion that this is it. This is the only thing that I need to focus on. That's why all of our sponsors, outside of MyPillow, that's a different one, but all the other sponsors have something to do with preparedness for food, preparedness with gold and silver, preparedness with meds, stuff like that. Okay, I'm talking to a solar company, and I'm not talking about getting solar panels on your roof. I'm talking about like emergency solar generators and stuff like that. We're trying to get a good mix of products, and unfortunately, I have to try everything before I ever recommend it. So it's like crap. It can get expensive, but I'm not going to recommend something that I don't actually know is going to be effective and work and all that good stuff. So, point being is that yes, well, my sponsors are fantastic, and the gold ones in particular. The reason I picked out 3, people ask me all the time. Yeah, I mean, it's because I vetted out a whole bunch of them. Most of them are terrible. Most of them are working either with the Chinese Communist Party, or they're donating to Democrats, or they're literally working with proxies of the World Economic Forum, or a combination of the 3. So if you go to jdrucker.com/gold, you will find 3 companies that I do recommend. So moving on to number 3, intellectual property will be meaningless as equity quashes innovation until the WHO demands it. Now, this is one that I think, I don't want to say this is a scoop, but at least my understanding after reading and rereading and talking to smarter people than me about it, I've come to the conclusion that the initial concern from their push to quash innovation through control of intellectual property, that's not the main goal. That's the pathway to get to their main goal. So according to, let me break it all down for you. So the pandemic treaty empowers the WHO to essentially circumvent intellectual property, circumvent patents. So let's say, for example, Pfizer comes out with the vaccine for some hemorrhagic fever that starts popping up later on in 2023, and they come out with the first vaccine, and they start producing it, and they make contracts. Well, the WHO will be able to come in there and say, hey, good job, guys, great job, appreciate it. We're going to take that from you, and we're going to get it mass produced in every country that can possibly produce it. That way we can get it out to the rest of the world much, much faster than even you guys can. And they'll be like, what? And they'll be, and yeah, we're not going to let you make much we're going to cut it down to where you're making your fair share. Now, 9 times out of 10, maybe more than that, when big pharma, which I do consider to be, as far as an industry is concerned, one of, if not the purely greed-driven industries out there, if when they're attacked like this, a lot of times I'm okay with that. This time I'm not, and it's for a reason. It is because this will stifle innovation. We know this. I mean, that's been the argument for capitalism-based healthcare from the beginning, not just in pharmaceuticals, but across the board. That's why Obamacare could never have worked. This is why socialized medicine has never worked. Okay, you allow people to, hey, I can get the regular, the government funded healthcare, or I could pay extra and get better insurance, better healthcare, or I could pay a lot more and get a world-renowned doctor from Sweden to come over and take out my tonsils if I want to. That choice, that medical choice, has always been a benefit, and it crosses over again, like I said, into pharmaceuticals. Now, where you get into some trickiness is where, okay, so where's the line between giving them incentive to innovate, but also making sure that things aren't, that greed isn't the only thing. That probably shouldn't say greed. Don't get me started on greed. Is good. That profits aren't the only thing driving the push. And we always use malaria as the example. How malaria is still a problem in Africa, and it shouldn't be, because if we wanted to, if Big Pharma wanted to, they could obliterate malaria literally in less than 2 years. And yet it's never been a focus, never been a concern, because there's no money in it, right? And we can argue that the whole reason that for example, hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin were panned by everybody was because there was no profit margin there for Big Pharma. They didn't want it. Now, you could also make an argument about that they really wanted to push the vaccines, and there was a completely separate agenda outside of healthcare and even outside of greed that drove that. That's for another day. We're not going to talk about that today, folks. I want to get this video up on YouTube, so I'm not going to talk about that stuff. It's very rare that I actually get a video that I'm allowed to put up on YouTube, but this is one of them. And people will ask, well, why do you put it up on YouTube? And I'll tell you, it's because YouTube, I disagree with it. I disagree with the idea of it, but the search engines still, to this day, even the not Google, I'm not just talking about Google, I'm talking about Brave Search, I'm talking about Bing, and what's the DuckDuckGo, I'm talking about most search engines. They don't, if you're watching this on Rumble or Roku or wherever, this show won't be found on those channels through the search engines. People need to be able to search for pandemic treaty and find today's show. The only way that can happen is if I can get it up on YouTube. And the only way I can get it up on YouTube is if I don't mention the bad words, because there's bad words that'll get the video taken down. Anyway, this video is probably going to be taken down anyway. So if you are watching it on YouTube, the replay on YouTube, then be sure to press the thumbs up button. It's just maybe that'll stave off the bad guys. Point is that, okay, so you got this, the World Health Organization stifling innovation, quashing innovation by having complete control over what can be heralded as intellectual property, right? And people will say, well, but that's only under the case of pandemic. I'll talk to, I've already mentioned that a couple of times. It is about preventative, so we'll encompass all that stuff. And then people will say, well, you know what? It'll be okay because they'll still try to do it because then they'll know they get something out of it. And I would argue that if their goal is to make massive profits, as they did through the pandemic, as they did through that stuff, do you think that they're going to focus on something that could be essentially taken away from them at a whim? Or will they put their investment into research? Will they put that towards, I don't know, skincare? Okay, maybe they're going to make the next better version of Viagra. Maybe they can go after something that they know, or they can have a reasonable expectation that the World Health Organization isn't going to co-opt it and take it from them. So they will put their investments into perhaps non-essential pharmaceutical products. But it'll get worse, because then once we extrapolate, if we can assume that, if we can take Bill Gates and Anthony Fauci at their word, which you're like, why would you take them at their word? I'm saying take them at their word when they say there's going to be another pandemic. The next pandemic, which should be worse, which is going to come any day now. I think it's scheduled for September. We take them for their word, or at their word, that there will be another pandemic, probably very soon. I would argue that maybe they were just waiting to unleash the next plandemic, the next scamdemic, for after they have control through the WHO, which means that if and when this gets signed, and if and when the 2005 IHR gets amended and adopted as the new law of land in the WHO world, if and when those two things happen, which will be happening here very, very soon, then that's when we should expect a manufactured need for them to go after it. So at that stage, let's say in the near future, we do have another need for them to get involved, for Moderna to spring into action, for Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, and everybody else to say, oh, here we come to save the day and make money. Oh, whoa, everybody hit the brakes. Wait, the WHO is going to take this from us if we build it. So just let the other guys build it. Let's just focus on the next Viagra. This is where the WHO comes in and says, oh, you want to hold back. How about this? What if we form a partnership with you guys? We'll call it a public-private partnership between you and the U.S. government, and then you guys and the U.K. government, and then you guys and the Chinese government, and everybody forms this public-private partnership where you're going to get paid. You individually, you're going to get paid for this, and we'll just basically make it available. You'll be able to continue to do what you're doing with, keep building your Viagra alternative. But in the meantime, also, we need you to work on this. And we have some ideas of what we want it to be able to do. Okay. It definitely has to use mRNA technology. It definitely has to have this. It definitely has to have that. And if you guys can accomplish that, we'll make it worth your while. That's what this means. It's not just about quashing innovation. Quashing of innovation, and in other words, quashing of profits, is a way of essentially forcing big pharma to play ball. And by forcing, it's not like they're going to need their arms twisted, because again, the people that will be making the decisions, they're going to be fully taken care of. Okay, Albert Bourla is not going to take a hit to his bottom line when this starts to manifest. He's not going to be excluded from the globalist elite cabal's inner circle. He would never let that happen, because then he might actually have to get a real jab or something, or he might actually not be invited to their bunkers in New Zealand or whatever it is. He's not going to risk that, so he's going to sign on to it. Other people are going to sign on too. You might say, "Oh, but what about the profit margin?" Well, the profit aspect of it for the investors, that might actually take a hit, you know. And I would say that if this gets signed, not giving financial advice by any means, totally not. But I know that if I own stock, and obviously I would never own stock in Pfizer or Moderna, but I know that if I own stock in Pfizer or Moderna, I would wait. I would get out of them after this is signed, and I would wait until signs that they're going to be basically bolstered, and then I would hop back in. And because they're going to go, it's going to be a reverse U shape. They're going to go great. Yeah, they've been going great, great, great. They've been hit lately, and it's going to go hit plummet, and then it's going to skyrocket. Again, not financial advice. This is just what I would do if I had no soul and was willing to invest in Pfizer or Moderna or any of those guys. Oh, thank the Lord, though I do have a soul. Um, as much I got to read this real quick. As much as part of me is pleased to watch Big Pharma get squeezed, the end results will be horrific for the people. The system is corrupt, but at least we know they are driven by profits and therefore they want to continue to innovate. The pandemic treaty will lead to a completely different, socialized version of pharmaceutical research that will be driven by the common good rather than the benefits of investors or benefit for investors. It will not solve the problems we currently have with Big Pharma. It will only redirect the threats. We'll be fighting against expanding tyranny instead of just greedy corruption. I'll take greedy corruption and continue to fight that good fight every day versus having the WHO essentially take control over Big Pharma. Now you might say, but it doesn't say that anywhere in there. It doesn't say they're going to take control of Big Pharma. Aha, it doesn't say that, but you've got to extrapolate. You have to see what they're trying to do with intellectual property and then expand it out to where this will end. These aren't stupid people. They know what the response will be. They're counting on it. They're counting on greed to drive many of these people who are making decisions in Big Pharma. They're counting on that greed and that desire for self-protection to kick in and for them to say, all right, well, I guess we're just going to have to sign up and we'll get greatly rewarded when we do. Number, what are we at, 4? I think we are. Let's see. I didn't number these. So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3. Yeah, we're on number 4, censorship. I said that both the IHR, there is overlap between the 2005 IHR rule changes, the amendments, and the pandemic treaty, and this is one of them. Both of them are very, very just bullish on expanding censorship, on centralizing censorship, because they know that their greatest enemy, other than God, of course, their greatest enemy is an informed population. Their greatest enemy is for the people to know what they're doing. The greatest enemy is the truth. So they want to control the truth. They want to be the ministers of truth. They want to be the ones that are saying, oh, no, 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 you can't say that. You can't say that on Twitter. You can't say that on Facebook. You can't say that in your news report. You can't put that on your blog. You can't put that in your YouTube video. You can't even have a Rumble channel. You can't even be on Brighteon or BitChute. As a matter of fact, you can't even have a bank account. As a matter of fact, if you don't shut up, we're going to kill you. Okay, so they might not say that yet, but I think eventually we'll get to that point. You know, hopefully, Lord willing, that'll be down the line. And hopefully by that point, I'll be in some secret homestead compound in Idaho or something, because they are going to come after me. So let me read this is Article 17 again from the WHO CA Plus, the zero draft. Article 17, Section 1 states, the parties commit to increase science, public health, and pandemic literacy. Oh, that sounds so good. Sounds so wonderful. In the population, as well as access to information on pandemics and their effects. Hey, wonderful so far. And then to tackle false, misleading, misinformation, or disinformation, including through promotion of international cooperation. You know, they tried to sneak the Ministry of Truth being run by the Department of Homeland Security. They tried to sneak that upon us last year. I'm sure you guys remember that weird dancing, singing lady, Nina, I think it was her name. Nina, some last name I can't pronounce. Yeah, they tried to sneak that through, and of course we objected. Why aren't we objecting to this? Why is there not this alone should be enough to get everyone, every single conservative and alternative media, journalist and publication out there, all of them should be screaming, whoa, 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 you're talking, so wait, you're going to sign a treaty that allows an international organization to decide what gets censored and how it gets censored, what we're allowed to say, what we can't say? They're allowed to penalize us? Because that's what this is saying, folks. Again, sometimes you have to read between the lines, especially when we're talking about censorship, especially when we're talking about something that is being done for the common good, as they like to say. They're going to censor us. They're going to tell us, you can't say that on television. You can't say that on YouTube. You can't say that on Facebook and Twitter. And if you think Elon Musk is going to protect you from this, no. Elon Musk has, what, $50 billion invested into it? You know, he's not. He's fighting. I get it. He's fighting the good fight right now for the truth to be allowed to come out. For the most part, he's not doing a perfect job, but he's doing a heck of a lot better than his predecessors. He's doing a heck of a lot better than anybody else in big tech. But do you think that he's going to be Mr. Oh yeah, let's keep fighting the good fight if the WHO comes to him and says, hey, it's a nice little social network you got there that you spent $50 billion on. Be a shame if it was outlawed for spreading misinformation or disinformation. If you don't think that could possibly happen, and you haven't been paying attention, it does. It can happen. I shouldn't say it does happen now, even though it does, but I don't want to explain that. Not today. It can happen in the very near future, to where all of the things that we were too scared to say on Twitter before, we won't be able to say them on Twitter again. All the things, as I noted earlier, that I won't post on YouTube because it'll get taken down. What if that's ubiquitous? What if that's no longer just about what you put on social media? What if it's because you're texting it to your friends or relatives and they're able to see this because they can? They're able to identify you and track you because they will be able to, because they probably already can. What are we going to say then? Do you have what it takes to stand up against that? You might say yes. And then I would ask you, how? Because the how is the tough part. How is the tough part across the board. It's depressing sometimes. But again, we're not in charge. Just remember that. We're not in charge. God's plan will prevail one way or the other. Let's go ahead and go to break. And then I think we're down to 3. We've got 3 more to go and 2 segments, so I think we can squeeze it in. So let's go to break. It was Henry Kissinger who once said, who controls the food supply controls the people. Now, I, for one, do not want to be controlled by anyone, especially somebody like Henry Kissinger or Klaus Schwab or Joe Biden or Gavin Newsom or really anybody, okay? I don't want to be beholden to anyone. I don't want to be standing in a bread line with Bernie Sanders, or which will eventually be converted into a cricket line or a mealworm line or a artificial lab-grown meat line. Not me. I'm not going to do it. I have found, well, actually, I technically started one company and then found 4 others that can help people to secure themselves long-term storage food. Go to jdrucker.com/food. That's jdrucker.com/food, and you'll see the 5 companies that I have selected. One that I'm building, and 4 more that we're working with to try to get as much food to the people as possible. I know what a lot of you are thinking. You're probably wondering, if you've been watching the whole show, you're probably like, holy crap, that was the first 4. You mean it gets worse? As a quick recap for those who joined late, these are the 7, the 7, I guess you could say worst parts. 7 ways the WHO pandemic treaty will obliterate far more than U.S. sovereignty. When we talk about sovereignty is so important. That's what it enables us. That's what allows us to do what we do. Otherwise, we would be beholden to other nations, beholden to more international bodies. But unfortunately, we still are. We are beholden to them. We still obey them in many ways. Ever since Joe Biden has become president of the United States, somehow we have been controlled as a nation. Our policies have, at least. All we have left, really, is ourselves as patriots. All we have left is our God. For those who are Bible-believing Christians, all we have left are the things that drive us to try to prevent this tyranny that's coming in all forms. It's not just medical tyranny. It's all we have left. And that's why when I say that we've gone through those first four, let's go ahead and recap those. Number one is 20% of U.S. medical supplies go to the World Health Organization for worldwide distribution. That sucks. Number two, medical surveillance will be invasive and ubiquitous. That too sucks. Number three, intellectual property will be meaningless as equity quashes innovation until it doesn't, until all of a sudden the World Health Organization makes them an offer they can't refuse, and all of a sudden it's all just one big happy family. Government-run socialized medicine across the world, and nothing, if you want to, you better figure out how to heal yourself, which isn't a bad idea. And then number four, censorship will be centralized and supreme. And when I say supreme, they will have the clout that even the U.S. government does not have. They will have the ability to shut us down, whether we're individuals who are out there trying to do, spread the word, spread the truth, or if it's companies. Doesn't matter. It really doesn't. This is one of the reasons why, I'm a big fan of Gab. I know that a lot of people don't like Gab because for whatever reason it got this, the corporate media installed this notion that, oh, it's just a bunch of anti-Semites. Look, I go on Gab every day and I just follow the right people, because after 3 years, however long I've been on the site, I've never seen one time, not once have I seen an anti-Semitic trope or something posted on the site. Crazy. Maybe I'm just lucky, I guess. Maybe if you don't follow anti-Semites, you won't get anti-Semitic tropes or something. I don't know. It's crazy how that works. But the reason that I do like Gab is because it is decentralized to some extent. I mean, it's centralized, but it's, they have their own servers, they have their own economy, they have their own everything. They're trying to stay as unbeholden as possible. Now they have other challenges, of course, but at least that part is square. Okay, you can't say the same thing about True Social. You can't say the same thing about Getter. You can't say the same thing about Parler or the new Twitter. Definitely not the old Twitter. Okay, so maybe we need something even better than that. Something to consider. Something to consider. Number 5 on this list. Worldwide vaccine passports will be mandatory. Let me repeat that for those who weren't paying attention. Worldwide vaccine passports will be mandatory. They're not necessary, but they will be mandatory. And I'm going to refer to Tom Parker over at Reclaim the Net, who did an excellent job of breaking it down. And this part, to be clear, this is not in the pandemic treaty. This is part of the 2005 IHR, the amendments, the regulations. There's been over 300 amendments, by the way. Over 300 that have been proposed. And one of them basically makes it to where you will have vaccine passports available and mandatory. And funny part is they're talking about multiple different ways to initiate this. That way, it's not just, keep the Americans from traveling to France. No, it'll be everywhere. It doesn't matter what level of sophistication, first world, third world, doesn't matter. They'll be able to figure out a way to track all of us and to prevent us from being able to engage unless we have this. Which is why, again, I always say, get ready, find yourself, make allies locally, figure out how to engage in the world locally as much as possible, unless you want to get your vaccine passport and be controlled. Your choice. According to Tom Parker over reclaimthenet.org, the WHO laid out its plans for global vaccine passports in a series of proposed amendments to the International Health Regulations of 2005, a legally binding instrument that imposes various conditions on 196 countries when the WHO declares certain types of health emergencies. And again, for those who missed it earlier, it doesn't have to wait for a health emergency. Number one, they have the power with the signing of the pandemic treaty. They will have the power, the sole power, to declare pandemics and health emergencies. Number two, their focus is on pandemic and epidemic prevention, which means that power It's not going to be contingent on a disease popping up, because they can always say, hey, in the name of preventing the next pandemic, we need you to do this. Anyway, the movement, this is back to the article by Tom Parker over at reclaimthenet.org. The movement to amend these international health regulations began in January last year when the Biden administration quietly pushed for major changes. Did you know that, by the way? Do you remember hearing about that last January? We talked about it in February. I did have Dr. Peter Bregan on, and we kind of broke the story about the whole pandemic treaty and all. And we broke the story about the Biden regime pushing this idea, this expansion of powers for the WHO. And it would take somebody like Joe Biden to be able to do this. As I've said multiple times, those who believe that the 2020 election was stolen, you could come up with all these various excuses. You could say it was because Trump had mean tweets. It's because they just didn't like him. Orange Man bad. It's because they wanted to whatever, cover up malfeasance. They wanted the Ukraine war. They wanted all these various things, and I'm sure a lot of that, if not most of it, if not all of it, played a part in it. But the big reason, to me, in my humble opinion, is that Donald Trump pulled us out of the World Health Organization and made these rules obsolete. They needed somebody in there that would reverse that and make us go full board. I mean, this is as 180 degree of a shift as possible. Trump pulls us completely out. We're not obligated in any way. We're not giving you any money. We're not following your rules. You guys go do what you want to do. Okay, you be you. And now you got Joe Biden in there who does the exact opposite, who not only says, hey, we're back in the WHO. Hey, we're back in. We're giving you more money. He's also saying, hey, as a matter of fact, you guys need to do more. You guys need to have more power. You guys need more money. You guys need more control. We need less sovereignty here in the United States. That's literally what this Biden-Harris regime has done. And if you don't think that has something to do with if or not there was not a stolen election in 2020, then, you can blame it on tweets or Orange Man bad or whatever. To me, this is it. This is the big one. This is the big one. Anyway, back to here. The move last year when the Biden administration quietly pushed for major changes. Since this initial push, other member states have proposed their own amendments, and the total number of proposed changes now sits at 307. These proposed amendments give the WHO new powers to declare potential health emergencies. That's so important. Potential, prevention. It's not about waiting for the next COVID-19 or the next variant or the next spread. It's about stopping it, or at least pretending that that's what they're trying to do, because to me, they can stop it by just not unleashing it in the first place, but I digress. To declare potential health emergencies and include commitments from member states to recognize the WHO as the coordinating authority during certain types of health emergencies, which will be ongoing. They also outline how the WHO intends to use its new powers to push global vaccine passports when it declares potential or actual health emergencies. Again, I'll repeat that. I keep repeating myself, but you guys have to pay attention to this stuff. They also outline how the WHO intends to use its new powers to push global vaccine passports when it declares potential or actual health emergencies. And again, there will always be a potential health emergency. The current version of the IHR already allow the WHO to issue recommendations to review proof of vaccination, require vaccination, and implement tracing of contacts of suspect or affected persons. However, these proposed amendments to the IHR greatly expand on the existing recommendations and lay out a framework for digital vaccine passports and other forms of digital tracking. And as I noted earlier, the amazing work by James Rodusky, I got to get his name right because you guys are going to look it up, and it's important to know who it is that you're supposed to look up. It was where'd it go? Cheese and rice. My dad used to say that all the time. Cheese and rice. And how am I not able to find it? Oh, because it was way up at the top. That's right. It's been a while. James Roguski, Roguski. As he noted, okay, they're making these changes through the IHR amendments. They're making the changes to take everything from recommended to required. They're making it binding. It was to be clear, the IHR already is binding. Okay, we're already in that pandemic treaty. They're going to make it binding. We're about to get into that. And then these amendments, they don't need to be approved. They don't need Joe Biden to sign off on these amendments to the IHR. We're already in it. Changes they make, he's pushing, and he would sign in a heartbeat because, again, he's the one pushing for a lot of this stuff already. However, these proposed amendments to the IHR greatly expand on the existing recommendations and lay out a framework for digital vaccine passports and other forms of digital tracking. New text has been added that allows member states to require documents containing information for a lab test in digital or physical format and information on vaccination against the disease. Another amendment states that documents containing information concerning travelers' destination should preferably be produced in digital form with paper form as a residual option. Okay. One amendment paves the way for other types of proofs and certificates, which may be designed by the Health Assembly. That's the WHA, the decision-making body, the rules-making body of the WHO. And will be used to attest the holder's status as having a decreased risk of being the disease carrier. These other proofs include test certificates, which provide proof someone has been tested for a disease. We've already seen those. You got to get tested before you can travel. You got to get tested before, show a negative test before you can do whatever. And recovery certificates, which provide proof someone has recovered from a disease. Not only do these proposed amendments to the IHR push for post-COVID vaccine passports, digital proofs, and digital certificates, but they also state that, quote, vaccination certificates should be considered approved when the WHO has declared a public health emergency or international concern, a PHEIC, and there's a scenario of voluntary vaccination using products still at the research phase or subject to very limited availability. In other words, what they're saying is that it's a blanket it's done up front, okay? In other words, you have your vaccine passport, new disease pops up, new emergency use authorization for the passport or for the vaccine for that disease pops up, it's already there. It's already part of your vaccine passport protocol. It's pre-approved. You don't have to, in other words, you don't have to oh, we're going to fight legislation to make to where that's not put on there. Oh, no, don't worry. It's already on there. It's done. I mean, they covered all their bases, folks. These are very smart people, very evil, but very smart people. Additionally, they mandate the digital health documents incorporate means to verify their authenticity via retrieval from an official website, such as a QR code. There was this movie that came out a couple of years ago. I think it was called Songbird. Okay, and it wasn't a very good movie. I'll just warn you up front. But I went ahead and had to watch. I don't like watching Hollywood movies, but this one was set in, I think it was actually set in 2023, if I recall, or some time around now in Los Angeles. And there were certain people that are immune to COVID. And the other people, COVID apparently in that scenario had morphed to where lockdowns were permanent lockdowns and nobody got to leave at all. Like you weren't allowed to leave your home ever. And you had stuff delivered by these bike carriers who happened to be immune. Everybody else had to wear hazmat suits if they ever went outside. And there was this whole Russian dude, oddly enough, who's out there killing people. It was not a very good movie. But the point is that everything was digitized and they were able to, you couldn't, it was like today, there was that doctor, I think it was in Colorado, who was selling fake vaccine certificates for like $50. Well, in this future scenario, because it was all digitized, it could only go through certain people. In this case, it was Demi Moore and her husband who could get these to people, but it cost like $150,000 to get one of these fake ones. And that's what they're trying to prevent. Not only do we not want you to be able to do anything without the vaccine passports, but they also don't want you to be able to make a fake vaccine passport. They want to make sure that everybody gets vaccinated. Everybody, no matter what. And it doesn't end there. These proposed amendments also lay out a minimum and maximum scenario for the data to be collected via these proposed vaccine passport and digital certificate scheme. At minimum, the WHO wants vaccine, test, and recovery certificates. At the minimum, keep in mind, they want vaccine, test, and recovery certificates to contain a person's name, national identity number, your social security number, passport number, type of vaccine, vaccine batch number, date of administration, place of administration, and an official stamp. That's the very bare minimum of what they want on these vaccine passports. In the maximum scenario, the WHO wants these digital certificates to contain all of the data from the minimum scenario plus a person's vaccination history and a QR code that supports the retrieval of vaccination information. And let's be clear, as we're talking about digital IDs, which we will talk about, I'm sure, in future episodes, this is a variation. Once you start combining those two, and then you start throwing in central bank digital currencies, and you start throwing in, in other words, you will have a scenario in which everything you do will have to go through these digital IDs, these vaccine passports. And if that sounds like crazy conspiracy theory stuff, or if that sounds to you like, oh, that's going to happen in, maybe 2040 or something like that, wrong. It's happening now. It's in the process of being laid out. The foundation is being formed right in front of our noses. This is why, again, I keep going back to this. I keep saying, I don't know why the hell nobody's talking about this. Well, I don't. They should be talking about this. Everybody should, and yet they're not. Let's go to one more break, and then I will conclude today's show. So I'm super excited. Let's go to break, though. If you're listening to conservative or alternative media, chances are you've got people telling you to use their MyPillow code. I'm going to be one of them. I love Mike Lindell. I consider him to be a friend. I love MyPillow. I consider them to be the reason that I don't have back problems. I'm not kidding. Right now, they do have their new MyPillow 2.0, the second iteration. It's the first time they've actually changed the scientific formula or whatever it is that Mike does with his smart people that they make their pillows, right? You can buy one, get one free by going to mypillow.com, selecting MyPillow 2.0 and using promo code JDR. And you might ask, why should you use mine instead of anybody else's? Look, all the codes are the same. Okay, they all get you the same discount. If you like me, if you want to support this show, hey, mypillow.com/JDR. Just got a text. I don't know. I got a missed call, not a text. I think that this means that I'll be on Caravan to Midnight with John B. Wells tonight. So if you guys want to check it out, I will assume that he wants to talk about what we're talking about today. So we will see. And again, I'm not saying that I'm definitely going to be there, but they usually only call and say, hey, Rucker, can you come on tonight? So check to see if I'm there. We'll see. Number 6, we got 2 more to go through, and we got about 12 minutes. So I'm going to, well, that's enough time. I don't have to buzz through it. This is important, but these are the last 2. They're also the most important, but thankfully, they don't need much convincing. I think you guys are smart enough to know that I'm right about this. Pandemic prevention will leak into everything, including climate change policies. There's a reason why the powers that be have been pushing to call it a climate change pandemic. There's a reason why the powers that be have been saying, oh, that COVID is spread, the whole reason that it's spread so much is because of climate change. The reason that people are getting cancer more now is because of climate change. They're saying there was a ludicrous report that the whole reason that there's been this increase in myocarditis and pericarditis and strokes and heart attacks and other heart diseases over the last 2 years, coincidentally, is because of climate change. They're also trying to blame artificial sweeteners as well. But the point is that they won't blame, what the obvious cause. But it's all going to come back to climate change if they are able to. And I should say probably when they are able to say that the World Health Organization, in order to do their job of preventing pandemics and preventing epidemics, that they're going to need to have control over climate change policies. And what exactly are climate change policies? Is that just about energy? Is it just about, oh, you can't drive a car, you have to switch to an electric car? No, folks. When you have control, whoever has control over climate change policy, literally everything that happens in the world today, all policies have some sort of effect on climate change. Everything that happens in the world is either caught, and from their perspective, not from mine, saying from their perspective, everything that happens in the world is either caused by climate change or it helps to cause climate change or both. That's it. It doesn't matter. Okay. Pick Pick any mundane activity, anything. I don't care. Go to the bathroom. Oh, no, that's exacerbating climate change. How? Well, because. And then they'll find some scientist who will say, well, actually, when you go to use the bathroom, then you do this and you exude this and you blah, 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 blah. And whenever you flush, that's the water and the climate change. Okay, pick anything. I don't care. It's not, oh, well, I'm going to go walk my dog. Oh, well, the dog walking, that causes climate change. Well, but I'm bringing a bag. Oh, well, that bag is plastic. That causes climate change. I mean, literally, folks, anything. It's the skeleton key for overall policy. This is the pathway through which the powers that be, through the World Health Organization, through the IFR, through the IHR, and the amendments and the pandemic treaty. This is through the path through which they'll be able to have complete control over the world. Okay, if we don't stop them, this is it. This is the big one. I keep saying it over and over again because I need you guys to keep saying it over and over again. I need you guys to push the like button on the video. I know it sounds, I know a lot of people say that. I don't like saying it. This time I'm saying it. Okay, I'm saying push the like button. Why? Because we need more people to learn this stuff. We need people to be paying attention. Please, I'm begging, literally begging you. Share the video, share this, or just share the article, or just don't ever mention, this isn't about me. Don't mention me. Don't mention the article. Find information of your own. Share it yourself. Talk to your family about it. Get the word out there because this is it. Okay, this is how they get there. It's how they get to control. And it's going to be through climate change. It's no coincidence, by the way. The entire climate change hoax started back with the discussions of global warming in the 70s. It was in the 70s that they first started saying we got to make some major changes or else the world's going to be collapsing in 10 years. There's supposed to be this massive food shortage in the 70s as a result of climate change, or as they were calling it then, global warming. We've all heard of the as Leslie Nielsen called it on one of the Naked Gun movies, the end zone layer. Yeah. We've all heard about the ozone layer. Well, what happened with that? I mean, is it gone? Did we fix it? We've all heard about aerosols. We've all heard about all these various things that are going to destroy us. And yet here we are, it's 2023. We're still here, still kicking. We shouldn't have been. We should have been gone in the 80s, right? Or the 90s, or the 2000s, or the 2010s. Now they're saying, what, 2034 is when it's all going to end if we don't stop eating beef altogether, stop driving cars, walk 15-minute cities, all this stuff. It's no coincidence that all of this hoopla, this climate change cult, was launched in the 70s, right around the time when the World Economic Forum was being born, when Klaus Schwab and Henry Kissinger and the Club of Rome were laying out their evil plans, their plans for world domination, for our sake, of course. It was always for our sake, because we're just too stupid to take care of ourselves. That's why climate change was manufactured. It was manufactured for today. It wasn't manufactured so Greenpeace could be formed. It wasn't manufactured so that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez could be elected or Greta Thunberg could speak before the UN. How dare you? It's not what it was for. It was for this. Because it's the skeleton key. They made it. They crafted it for the last 5 decades as the skeleton key through which they can control every aspect of policy in every nation across the world. And the pandemic treaty hands the power to them. It does. Now, the funny part, if you guys want to laugh at something, is that that's not even the worst thing. Okay, you might say, well, what could possibly be worse than control over everything? There's one thing that, giving people control over policy through climate change, that's bad. That's really bad. What's worse is if coinciding with that control over policy, do they also control the hearts and minds of the people? This is where we get into what I have listed as number 1, and that's the normalization of ESG on steroids through forced public-private partnerships. Whether through force or through brainwashing slash indoctrination, gaslighting, their goal, they don't want to subject the people through force. They will if they have to. But if you really want to look at their master plan is for you and me to willingly submit, to embrace their ideology, embrace the concepts that they're pushing forward, to not be ruled over as unwilling slaves, but instead to be ruled over as beholden and unhappy, but still obedient serfs. That's their idea. That's what they would prefer. They don't want to have to strong arm us. They want us to willingly give away our freedoms. They want us to willingly, and even a generation or two from now, to enthusiastically bow down. There was an image that was it was actually a few images that were spread around. It's probably 5 or 6 years ago, and it was of Kim Jong-un going around to various villages, and he went to this one village in particular in North Korea, and it became kind of a meme because you had these women and men that were standing there, coming out of their huts in North Korea and seeing Kim Jong-un, and they were bawling. Okay, they were just crying. They were so, and the memes were, oh, they're terrified because this guy's a dictator, right? Or he's a tyrant, or oh, this is all fake. They couldn't actually feel this way about this funny, pudgy little guy, right? And I'm thinking to myself, no, they truly were in awe. They were truly terrified, as if they were seeing an archangel, as if they were seeing Jesus manifesting before them. They were falling on their knees out of true reverence, because in their society, Kim Jong-un is essentially their god. And that's what the World Health Organization, that's what the World Economic Forum, the Council for Inclusive Capitalism, the powers and principalities, that's what they want. And you might say, I will never do that. And you're probably right. We probably won't do it. We've lived free. But if they get their way, and if, let's say, the world does continue on for another generation or 2 or 10 or however long, if they get their way, then through this, what I'm calling ESG on steroids, environment, social, governance, if they get this pandemic treaty signed and we can't stop it, then yes, future generations will be in awe of those people. They will not know any different. They will be bowing. They will be feeling like, oh my gosh, I get to eat real bugs today. This is amazing that I don't have to eat the lab-grown fake chicken that they have for me, usually most days, most every other day, since we're only allowed to eat protein every other day in this future dystopian society. Today, we get mealworm burgers, and that's incredible. It's just so awesome. I just can't wait. Do they have ketchup, or do we not get ketchup this month? You will own nothing, and you will be happy. And the pathway to this great reset is through the pandemic treaty. The pathway through which they'll be able to take over this planet is being manifested in front of us right now. And there's so few people that are talking about it that it disgusts me. I'm going to end today's show by reading this portion regarding, because I need you guys to understand what this normalization of ESG on steroids through forced public-private partnerships, how this will likely manifest. And again, this isn't directly from the pandemic treaty or the IHR amendments. This is extrapolating out, taking it, seeing what they have planned beyond what they're stating overtly. And what they're stating overtly is already bad enough. But now let's take it a step further. As we extrapolate out the likely repercussions from adoption of either the vaccine treaty, the IHR changes, or both, it's challenging to come up with the worst of the various evils. I decided their push for ESG is the biggest threat because it's only loosely pointed out, but never explicitly named. They do talk about ESG throughout the pandemic treaty. They just don't talk about it together. They talk about the environmental impacts and the need to control the environment. They talk about societal, social impacts throughout. And yes, they talk about governance, and they talk about these 3 components of ESG dozens of times in this 32-page document. They just don't put them together. But if we start to put it together, to piece the puzzle together that they're forming before us, then we can see finally that this is really their ultimate goal. because through this, they will be able to control hearts and minds. Through this brainwashing, indoctrination, and through forcing it via public-private partnerships that will go beyond big pharma, that will engage in media, worse than it already is, big tech, worse than it already is, public schools, worse than they already are, and eventually, through the banking system, then you will have a choice. You can either get with their program and embrace it and love it, own nothing and be happy, or you can die. Check it out. You can read this article in full over at, again, it's like 3,000 words of notes, essentially. It's not even an article, but it is. Over at discernreport.com. Be sure to check it out. I'll be talking about this more on tonight's show, tonight's premium version of the show, which you can find at redvoicemedia.com/subscribe. Sign up. It's like $1 for the first week, $1 trial. So check that out. Be sure to use promo code JDR. I don't know what it does, but it does something, I think. Maybe it doesn't. Do it anyway. Promo code JDR at redvoicemedia.com/subscribe, and you'll get my daily 20 or 30 minutes of extra awesome show stuff. So great. Lord willing. Long show. Lord willing, I will be back very soon with another episode. But in the meantime, you all stay strong, stay safe. God bless.